All right, so thank you everyone for being here and joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Margaret Zolke. I'm the Career Advisor and Alumni Relations Specialist for the Collegiate Data Science Institute, and I'm very happy to be joined by a panel of HDSI faculty, HDSI alumni, and an industry representative today. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. We are recording, so please keep your audio and your video off unless you're a panelist. We will be doing Q&A through the chat feature towards the end of the event. And so feel free as things come up, you can post your questions in the chat throughout the event. I've got some prepared questions to address with our panelists, but this is definitely the time to ask your questions and concerns and to get their insight and expertise. So today it's the second workshop of our Getting Ready for Grad School series. Last week I did an overview of all the different application materials and recommended timelines and things to consider when you are applying for grad school. So we've got that recording available now. That'll be shared in this Monday's weekly newsletter and eventually uploaded to the HDSI website. Today, we've got our panel to share their experience, their decision-making process, and different career pathways available through the different degrees that they've either pursued or are currently pursuing. And then next week is the last of our workshop, where we will have different programs available to share information to students as well as connect with students after for additional questions and concerns. We're still waiting to hear from a couple programs. As of right now, the one that is definitely coming is UC at San Diego's Rady School of Management Master of Science in Business Analytics program. And we've got some panelists to share some information about business analytics graduate programs today as well. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. If you want to introduce yourselves in the order that I have you here on the slide, just since who knows what everyone's order looks like on their screen. And then I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see everybody, and then we'll get started with our questions.
Hello everyone. I'm Nguyen. You can also call me Xiao. And I'm currently in UC Berkeley's IEOR department. I just graduated this year from Data Science Department of UCSD. And to share a little bit about my application process, I would say I was looking for either data science direction or the more entrepreneurship direction. So I was looking for programs like Cornell Tech's connective media, also some data science programs like Columbia's New York, and UCLA, of course, and some more famous schools as well. And I will talk about, but as we all know, like the application process really changed this year. The whole atmosphere just changed. So we are focused on that. So the past experience doesn't really apply, but we got the newest updates and we'll share later.
Great, thanks so much, Chris.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Nguyen. I am currently enrolled in the UCLA Master of Science in Business Analytics at UCLA. It's a business school, so a lot of the masters would be like arts and sciences. This one is part of the Anderson Business School, so there are definitely differences there. I think later we're going to get a chance to go into more of our experience, so I'll get into that later. It's about a 15-month program, and I graduated UCSD Data Science in June of this year still. That's taking forever to finish.
All right, Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul Byers. I'm an engineering manager for integration and digital systems at Boeing Customer Support in Seal Beach, California. I'm currently also in the Anderson School, UCLA, fully employed MBA program after getting my undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering and spending some time in industry.
Great, thanks so much for joining us. And Professor Ellis?
Hi, everybody. I am Shannon Ellis. I have a background in biology. So my bachelor's was in biology. I went straight to my PhD, which was in human genetics. So I can come at the perspective of somebody came from a not necessarily computational background. And after my PhD, I did a postdoc in a biostatistics department. And now I am an assistant teaching professor in cognitive science and HDSI here at UC San Diego. I've been here for about 2 years.
Great, happy to have you. And last but not least, Professor Eldridge.
Hey everybody, I'm Justin. I did my bachelor's degrees in physics and applied math, and then went straight to a PhD in computer science in machine learning. And now I'm here at HDSI, where I'm assistant teaching professor.
Great. All right. So we're going to start with our alumni, and I'd specifically like to start with Sean. So Sean, for those of you attending who don't know what, IEOR is, it's Industrial Engineering and Operations Research. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that is and what kind of career you hope to have after completing your degree?
All right. So for IEOR, yeah, the full name is Industrial Engineering Operation Research, and it is a very interesting because it really is very well rounded. You will learn about the production side, and you will also learn about how to optimize the production side, and you will also learn about how to analyze the result of the production side. So it's basically a lot to do with analytics, and they are using a lot of data science techniques to apply to the optimization side. As well, machine learning is a great tool for optimization. And as for what I'm gonna do after this, I forgot to touch a little bit. This major actually combines a lot about leadership and team working. That probably applies to all the grad programs, but I feel like we focus a lot on how to work as a team. And actually we learn a lot in UCSD's capstone program that benefits a lot as well. As for what I'm going to do after this, I guess it'll be more personal because I'm running a little startup, and we are running a little project, and that's what I've been doing. So I'll keep doing my project. Yeah.
That's great. I do have a question, since you mentioned that you work on a team. Something that's come up recently with our students, because data science, it's not part of the School of Engineering. A lot of students are really concerned about how their data science degree will be viewed when going into an engineering grad program. So the people in your cohort, are they all from engineering, or what do their backgrounds look like?
Oh yeah, I can definitely answer this question very well. For my specific department, IEOR, a lot of students come from definitely not from the data science. They are from math, they're from statistics, or very few from computer science. But for the other department, for the ECS department, the UC Berkeley's ECS department, I know someone who graduated from data science department to ECS department, and she actually. So I was really surprised because after you learn data science, now you learn computer science. It sounds pretty crazy, but that's really because the ESS department is focusing the data science side. So which means what she learned in the undergrad can apply to the grad school. Yeah.
Gotcha. Great. And you had mentioned when you introduced yourself, there were a lot of different programs that you had looked at. Could you share maybe some of the specific factors that you were looking for? Last week, I went over all the different factors to consider, but what were maybe some of the main ones that were important to you when making your decision?
Yeah. One of the most factors for me is I want to stay in California. I think that's very important because you gotta love where you work. You gotta love where where you study, and that's so I don't like the East Coast, so I choose to stay in the West Coast. Absolutely. Also, I do care about the ranking, and everyone cares about the ranking, of course. Also, I do care about yeah, I think location and ranking, if you combine them and you don't study something that's totally new to you, I think it should be good. Yeah. And one thing I really want to touch on that is because some students are asking me about the grad process because I already have done it. A lot of students are applying way too many programs, like over 10 programs. That's really not a good idea, because for recommendation letter, the professor cannot write that many recommendation letter because it's not just submitting a letter. It's like you gotta evaluate the person, and it's a tedious process. Also, you're gonna be admitted by like maybe 40% of them, and then you have to make decisions, and you take the spaces for others. You have to leave out the spaces for the programs that you don't like or you're not gonna go. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's great advice. I think especially right now with everyone so nervous, I think they're moving more to apply to as many as possible. But like you said, that's really not the right way to go about deciding which ones.
Absolutely not. Definitely not over 10.
Gotcha.
Anything over 10 is way too crazy.
Yes, yeah, that's that touches on. I recommended no more than 9 last week, so I'm glad that we're on the same page with that.
I was no more than 8.
Yeah. I think my last question that I want to address with you individually is your experience as an international student. Was there different things you had to consider or think about? And as you're talking with these friends, how is the process different now during COVID?
Absolutely, it's definitely a lot more different because a lot of international students are taking the online class from their hometown, and that's something you can do, and it's really something is really crazy, because you miss a lot of the stuff, and it's just kind of crazy, and you have all the time lag. In terms of the application process, I think international students have a tendency of applying way too many programs. Mm-hmm. Like I heard people like planning to apply like over 15 programs. That's way too crazy. Like go all the different directions, like computer science, data science, business analytics, all over this thing. All of that doesn't make sense at all. We should really limit down. Yeah, especially for the international students. Yeah.
Right. So it sounds like, your advice is kind of consistent, whether you're, international or non-international. Don't apply to too many programs. Really think about the location and if the ranking of the program is important to you, take that into consideration as well.
Right. Because we gotta be really, really confident because UCSD really prepares very well, especially the data science department. And if you look at the last year's application, it's really good. So don't be over panic. It's all about panic. Don't be panic. It'll be fine. You're gonna be admitted by somewhere. If you are not admitted, you're gonna get a great job as well. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So just don't panic.
That's definitely what students are looking to hear, especially from somebody who literally did it, was part of the very first graduating cohort. You've moved on to this exciting new step, and you found a way to, focus on your goals, and we're so excited to see what you move forward doing. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Moving on to our other alumni, Chris, with this in mind, with applying with a data, kind of on the reverse, right? So applying with a data science background into a business school, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, definitely. I just really quick, as someone who panicked and applied to 9 graduate schools, I will second, and Sean's advice is great. I'll get into that a little bit later though. So first, business school, data science background. I'm definitely one of the more technical people there's 43 people in my cohort currently at UCLA. I would say that there's a lot of specialization that the data science program has given me, where I have statistics classes and I have computer science based classes, right? It's obviously a modified computer science, focus more on like the data science aspects of it. But those kinds of things are also being taught, like to me currently. Granted, I've only taken, this is my first quarter at UCLA. So what I'm looking to get out of UCLA is the business school aspect, because when I was applying to grad school, I thought about what did I want to get out of graduate school, right? It's like the same thing with college. You don't just go to college because people say to go to college. You should go to college with something in mind to to get out of it. So, and I think that's even more true for graduate school.
Mhm.
So I thought about where my skills lie and what I want to do. And I felt that I was best communicating between technical people and non-technical people, because I like technical stuff, right? I'll watch number file videos on YouTube for like 3 hours. But I also like people, right? I've played in multiple rock bands. I like performing. I like talking to people. I'm very like social. So I wanted to make that a focus. So Master's in Science and Business Analytics, I felt was a good program for me because I thought that it could accelerate those things, or like put me in a position afterwards to be in a technical, non-technical, like communicator role, especially on like the analytics side, right? I mean, I like data, I like analytics, I like solving problems with data, obviously. That's why I graduated from data science at UCSD. So I felt that that was definitely, okay, so back to background business. I got tangential. Yeah, definitely more technical. So there's people all over in business school, because UCLA likes to admit kind of wild cards. There's someone that was a music producer. That was what they did, and now they're switching. A lot of econ backgrounds. Obviously, this is business. Some computer science, some biology. So yeah, that's how my background. So yeah, definitely more technical. Like if you feel like you're kind of a more technical person, and like with the data science program, it's definitely more technical than a lot of people applying to like an MS Business Analytics. Focus on being a good communicator, and those communication skills and those presentation skills. Like for example, the interview that I had for UCLA was give a presentation on something data related. That was it. That was all the direction that I got. So I had to choose something, and I had to make it. It wasn't necessarily about what I was presenting. It was about how I presented it. And so yeah, that's what I would say for those kind of business school type roles for someone with a background in data science.
So I mean, I think we're seeing more and more business analytics programs pop up, and for, deciding, first you have to decide what you want to focus on, but then you have to decide, okay, which program do I choose that has all these opportunities to focus on this same thing. So would you say that part of your decision-making process of choosing which business analytics program to go to was choosing one that came from the business school, or from that more, not as focused on the technical part, since you already had that skill and that training?
So I would say definitely for like business analytics programs, look at the curriculum. I talked to Professor Aaron Frankel about this when I was applying, and he said, you should absolutely look at the curriculum for these programs, because you don't want to repeat. You don't want to just do a grad school that gives you the same skills as data science, because undergraduate data science programs are relatively new. So these grad school programs might not account for that. And he said even to like look into this syllabi for some of the courses if you can. And this speaks to, I think, Sean's point about not applying to too many programs, because if you have 10 programs and you're looking in syllabi for each of the programs, like it's insane. And there's so many other factors, but that was definitely one. I definitely looked at the length of the program, right? There was a couple that were like very short. There's one that's 10 months. I was definitely looking between a year and 2 years for me, timeline wise. Tuition was a factor, location as well. Although I was more open to different locations, but I mean, I love LA, so that was definitely a factor in choosing UCLA. Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning though that I did apply to regular like applied data science masters, where it was definitely more on the technical side. I think my final decision actually came down to NYU and UCLA's, and NYU is definitely more technical. Last thing, projects. If there's a capstone project or some kind of like project, I valued that, because I don't have a ton of experience just going from education to education. I did do an internship in software engineering at American Express when I was at UCSD, but I was definitely looking for ways to fill out my experience along with my education. So that was definitely something that I valued.
Gotcha. So I know in previous conversations I've had with Sean, you know, he had mentioned to me that grad school, that was always a goal of his. Whereas Chris, in our conversations, you found yourself, you know, considering that, you know, more later on. And so for somebody that kind of came to that decision, where was it because you felt like you could get more experience from these capstone projects and experiences included in the program, or what was that you know, deciding factor of, yes, I'm going to apply to grad school?
So I think there was two main things, and this is going to be full honesty. I have one very smart friend who gives me a lot of great advice, and I just laid it on him because he knows me very well. And I was like, should I go to graduate school? And he was like, yes, I think you should. Secondly, which is a lot more applicable, is I Uday says it's Elton. No, it was not Elton, but Elton is also very good friends with him. So, oh my God. Okay, wait. Train of thought. Ask the question one more time.
Yeah, so
totally...
you're the deciding factor to move forward with applying to grad
school.
Oh,
right. Yeah, so the deciding factor for me was definitely like, I felt that the industry was not ready for undergrad data science majors, at least in its current spot. I think I was probably wrong about that, but in hindsight, but I felt that a lot of places, like jobs, would just not even look at my application for data science roles because I don't have a graduate degree. So I felt that was something that I needed to, you know, fully ensure that I was, you know, gonna have no problems. Also, with data science as well, I think that it's something that eventually you'd need some higher education with as far as like career advancement wise. So another factor was that right now in my life, because I'm so young, I have the least amount of responsibility, and so it would be like the easiest to complete grad school in this way. So that was definitely another factor. That these things are highly debated. Like there's equal arguments for both sides where you should wait and you should really know what you want to do. I've personally been a person that kind of, I've known what I like to do and what I want to do. I just didn't know what the best way to do that was. So like, yes, I didn't decide on grad school, but I've kind of known that I wanted to be a person that like communicates with people and with technical people. Mm-hmm. So those are some factors.
Yeah, that brings up something that I talked about last week, was preparedness, and whether it's, you know, I'm prepared now, I have, you know, least amount of responsibilities, I feel like I need this to really get the opportunities and positions that I'm looking for and interested in, versus, oh no, I'm not ready, this is too big of a commitment, I'm going to work a little bit longer and then see what exactly I want to go back for. So it is a very personal decision, and I think the more people can hear the way people individually, you know, come to those conclusions and decisions, if something resonates with that helps them make the decision for themselves. But like you said, it's a very personal, you know, decision and personal question. So I really appreciate you sharing your perspective on that.
Yeah, of course.
Switching gears, so we talked about business analytics. Now I would love Paul to talk about an MBA program. And so thinking about an MBA while working at such, you know, a technical organization like Boeing, how do you see an MBA potentially expanding career options in the tech field?
Sure, and I think one of the major things about being in a technical role, especially after a period of time, is you start to accrue a lot of experience, you start to accrue a lot of knowledge, and that means when you're being hired, you're becoming a significant investment. Mm-hmm. And when you're that kind of significant investment as a tech employee, mid to late career, those opportunities don't tend to come from just finding a job opportunity on a website and applying to it. They typically come from a network. And going and getting an MBA, one of the most important things is how that's going to impact your network. Who are you going to meet? What sort of circles are you going to be exposed to? It also gives you a solid foundation for leadership, the managerial, finance, marketing skills. And that's not just what you learn, but it's also almost as important what it signals to a prospective employer. You know, as a technical employee, whether you be a data scientist or an engineer for a considerable amount of time, you may be applying all those kinds of skills in your day-to-day job, but it's not always transparent to an employer that you can do those things. So getting a degree like an MBA or an MSBA, all that signals to the employer that you can do those things. One of the things specifically for data science is I think it helps with the storytelling. I think one of the things about doing data science work is sometimes you can get lost in the analysis or get lost in the data. And it's important to understand based on your audience, should your story be the analysis, or is the analysis simply providing credibility for your story or your conclusion or your recommendation? And an MBA degree gives you lots of opportunities to have to defend an analysis, a position, to other MBA students, to professors, things like that, and it really sharpens that knife, which can be really helpful in a tech skill.
That's a really wonderful point you brought up. Something that we've been in discussion with our industry partners recently is, you know, when people are you know, coming in from a very technical position and they try and explain their point, all they do is focus on the technical part. And one of them has said in the past, if it took you the longest amount of time to do that, don't talk about it at all, because no one really cares how you got there. They care what the result is. So I think that's really great advice. And I think it's really helpful to see where, you know, that additional skill set is really needed in the tech field. Sometimes people forget about that. Talking about, you know, MBA, MSBA, in your experience, maybe from a manager or just from, you know, going through the MBA, in your opinion, what do you see as the biggest difference between pursuing and that education of an MBA versus a business analytics graduate program? Are they seen differently? Do they, you know, carry different weight? What does that look like in industry?
I think one of the biggest things is that the Master of Science in Business Analytics is seen as a more technical degree, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to focus on the types of skills that you need there, like visualization, statistics, machine learning, and then usually a specific business domain, like say sports analytics or something, so that you get a little bit of domain knowledge to learn how to apply those technical skills. Whereas an MBA tends to be a little bit more broad, typically a longer program, where it's focused more on those foundational skills for management and leadership. You can, in many of those programs, take electives that make an MBA more technical. Like I think at Anderson, I can even take certain MSBA courses as electives, but it's not always that way. And to Chris's point, you really have to look at what that particular program offers as to what the options are. But generally, MSBA is technical and more focused, and MBA is a little bit broader and more foundational. Gotcha. Would be how I'd look at it as a hiring manager too.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's helpful because it's especially too with our students considering, like Chris mentioned, what's your goal of going back to grad school? A lot of the things you mentioned from that business analytics program, we incorporate in our curriculum. So, you know, again, like Chris mentioned, it's so important to look at the curriculum, but also really think about what are the skills that I'm intending to gain from this. A lot of my conversations with students when an MBA comes up is, oh, well, I don't care about being a manager. And so I think a lot of people just associate, oh, you get that so that you can, you know, climb the ladder or get into that manager position. And I see so much more benefit than that. So you touched on it a little bit already, but as somebody, you know, already in a manager position, you know, could you just share your thoughts on that of, you know, an MBA is more than just to become a manager?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the MBA, there are a couple areas where it can be a really helpful door into certain types of non-managerial roles based on the types of area you might be interested in. If you're interested in economics or finance, you know, there's some paths that opens into that area rather than taking a more maybe academic degree, depending on how you want to approach it. Like there's no right answer to these things. I mean, I think one of the questions that Chris kind of touched on was, should you take one right after undergraduate? Should you take one later on in a career? And just like that question, there's no right answer. You're going to be able to find people that have taken lots of different paths. But I know lots of MBA graduates who don't have manager roles and aren't seeking them, but it definitely helps with project management, especially in the larger scale projects. If you want to do something of a certain scale of impact, it helps to understand how an operation runs. It helps to understand finance, how this project is going to be reflected on a company's balance sheets. If you want to get into entrepreneurship, you know, how to read, how to understand how venture capital talks to you when you're proposing a project. Because if you don't have that background, you're going to be talking apples and they're going to be talking oranges, and you're not going to get a meeting of the minds. And how to read an offer sheet and things like that. So all of those things are things you can learn in an MBA, and the larger programs, all the programs in like the UCs, there's lots of opportunities to focus on that kind of area. So even if you're not looking to just become a manager, there are lots of ways you can customize your own experience to achieve all kinds of different types of academic goals.
That's great. Yeah, you bring up a lot of really great things. I've had some alumni share that are in more business focused grad programs. You know, I'm like, how's the first quarter going? And their response is, I'm learning so much verbiage and business language. I feel like I can articulate what I'm trying to say. And as you mentioned before, it really goes into that storytelling aspect of when you're trying to, you know, make a point, if you're not speaking the same language, that point is not going to be made. So I think that is just really helpful and wonderful to really show students. I think sometimes they can view some programs as like pigeonholing, and I think it's helpful just to know that this isn't going to pigeonhole you into the manager track. Instead, this is going to give you the skills you need to be successful in this field and in this domain. Thank you so much, Paul. I think that is really wonderful advice, and it's so helpful to have two panelists with both of these degrees so that we can kind of talk about the differences as students consider their options. While we're on this kind of domain track, I'd love to move on to Professor Ellis, who was fully in the domain with your undergrad and your grad, and then now you find yourself an associated faculty member with the Data Science Institute and teaching COGS 9. So can you just share some of your experience of what that transition was like, and maybe how you found opportunities for computing within a more non-computing degree focus?
Sure. To not give too much detail into the story, as an undergrad, I was doing research and I found myself using software that was very much a black box. And I knew that I wanted to continue doing research. I was pretty sure I wanted it to be in the genetics realm. So I was looking at PhD programs, and I had a handful of different program types, but all of them would allow me to do some sort of computational route. So I did go into my PhD looking for potential people that I could work with to do these computational type approaches, even though it was within a domain. So I started my PhD, and within the first year, I had chatted with my going to be mentor, and we had set out projects to make sure I had these skills. But to Chris's point at looking at the syllabi, I knew that my coursework was not going to give me these skills. This was what I was going to be getting outside of my courses. My coursework is going to be very much domain heavy. I took one computational course throughout my entirety of my PhD. I took 2 biostats courses. So that was very much, I knew it was going to be, the onus was going to be on me there. And so I started analyzing very large genomic data sets, and not doing as much experimentation at the bench as I had done previously, but really focusing in on using code to analyze data and to write software to help me analyze these very large data sets.
Gotcha. You bring up something really important that I'd like to take the opportunity to touch on, and that was mentorship. And I know that is, we want students, choosing programs where they'll have mentorship and guidance. But in my opinion, that mentorship is so much more important in a PhD program than a master's program. And so what was that transition like of going from undergrad and a PhD and having that mentorship available? Was that part of your decision-making process?
Yeah, and I would say the advice I tend to give students as they're looking at PhD programs, like don't, in most cases, go for one person unless you're very sure that that person's going to be your mentor, right? You've had a conversation with them, because things can come up. They might not have space, they might not have funding. So I did pick programs where there were a handful of people I was interested in working with that could be potential mentors, but I certainly did not know going into my PhD, and especially this is true in the biology realm, exactly who my mentor would be. So we did rotations in my PhD, and I met my to-be mentor then, but making the decision as to who my PhD advisor would be, I took mentorship in to that decision very heavily. And I encouraged my cohort mates to do the same, and some chose not to. And they went for like the most famous scientist who had like, you know, lots of really famous publications, and they got very little mentorship throughout their PhDs, which can be a great fit, right? Like somebody who has had experience in industry for a few years and doesn't need a ton of hand holding, that could be a great fit. Like they just want to hit the ground running. I was coming right from my undergrad. I didn't have a computational background. Like I needed a mentor who was going to have time to mentor me. So I always encourage students to like consider the match and the mentorship style, and knowing that like not every mentor is going to be great for every student. Like I still talk to my undergrad mentor all the time. I still talk to my PhD advisor. I still talk to my postdoc advisor and the person I did summer research as an undergrad. Like I have had incredible mentors across the way, and I really encourage everybody to like prioritize that in their decision making.
You bring up something really important. Last week, I think the main questions that I had, and some of the main questions I've been receiving during my appointments with students considering grad school, is letters of recommendation and an asking and an approaching. And so what is that experience like to ask and approach someone to be a mentor? And do you have any tips for successfully doing that?
Yeah. Man, so I have so many thoughts on letters right now because I'm like drowning in writing letters, and I've had to say no to some students, and it sucks. Like it's totally sucks. Anyway, so for the approaching to be mentor, I don't have tons of advice here because it was all kind of built in, right? Like I was doing rotations, and I did rotations with 3 different people. And during that time, it like starts to foster this mentorship. So I never in that sense had to be like, will you be my mentor? I did have to say like, hey, I want to come back and join your lab as a PhD student. Is this like, you know, what projects could we work on? So like for my official mentors, they kind of fell into my lap. So for example, even in my PhD, I had to form a thesis committee, and I didn't know I was like my first year of grad school. I didn't know people at Hopkins, and I asked around, I did my research, and I found people, but like ultimately the person became my postdoc advisor. My PhD advisor suggested he be on my thesis committee. So that worked out. When I started applying to postdoc positions, that was another time I had to like kind of email a ton of people, some who didn't have postdoc positions available because they don't like advertise these things. And I got ignored by lots of people, and that happens. But you would much rather a mentor who's like all in than somebody who's like dodgy and really doesn't have the time, because it's just, you're not going to get as much out of it. And know that some people just don't have the time, and that doesn't mean you suck.
Right.
That's how these things go.
Yeah, I think that's always worth saying, is it's normal. It doesn't have a reflection on you, especially right now, people's schedules and commitments and responsibilities. Everyone has a lot going on. So don't take it personally. But what I'm hearing is maybe if you are considering going right from undergrad in the PhD, make sure you look at the faculty. There's multiple people that you would be excited to have as your mentor, and maybe look at programs where that mentorship is kind of already built in, or you get exposure to those faculties. So it's not so much on you to have to individually put yourself out there and ask.
Yeah, and know that faculty suck at updating their websites.
Gotcha.
So like you might not be getting the most up-to-date information on there when you're searching on the internet.
Gotcha. Always worth mentioning. Thank you so much. I think the one last question that I'd like to ask you is just about, focusing on a domain for our students that feel confident in their technical skill set. They want to move into a more domain focused program. They need to take a couple prereqs, outside of data science for that. did you find that in your cohort you had everyone was coming from the same background? And if you had people coming from other backgrounds, was that a tough transition for them that you witnessed?
Yeah, we certainly had a variety of like majors and where people were coming from in their background. I will say there were a handful of people who came from more computational backgrounds, and they did really great research, but they did struggle in the coursework, right? So like you delve into cell biology, and if you've never taken a cell bio course at the undergraduate level, there's a lot. It's just a lot to take in. And that went for all of their courses. So they were people that I saw struggle a bit more on coursework. They still ended up doing fine. They still got their PhDs, and their research was awesome. But they had to like buckle down on the courses a little more than the people who had a more solid background in the domain. And, you know, we all still got our PhDs. Everybody still did great research. It was just like, where are you going to dedicate your time that first year so that you don't fail your courses? And they need to get caught up on the biology side. And I have seen physics background, computer science background, stats backgrounds, all do really well within a domain and pick it up pretty quickly. Like, it's not impossible. It just takes time.
Right. That's I think that's really wonderful advice of where are you going to put your time and energy and focus that first year to set you up for success, and that it's not impossible, and maybe meet with your academic advisor to think about how you can use those electives that you have available to you to maybe get some exposure at the undergrad level before moving on to the PhD.
Yeah, if you're thinking a domain, consider just getting some background core courses to like set you up for success going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And moving on to Professor Eldridge, there's a lot that I want to ask you, coming from, you know, physics and math into a PhD computer science program. A lot of our students, you know, similar to the question I brought up to Sean, a lot of our students are really nervous about going from data science into computer science, not because they question their ability, but because they question, you know, how admissions will see them and how they'll compare to the rest of their cohort. So could you maybe touch on that a little bit for those students that are here just to hear that perspective from you?
Yeah, I think from an admissions perspective, coming from a field that's different from the master's program that you're applying to or PhD program can kind of be spun as a strength. You know, you're coming from a more quantitative perspective. And so when you're in a master's program like CS that might have a machine learning component or something like that, that quantitative perspective gives you sort of a leg up over people who came from a traditional computer science background. You know, so one thing I want to point out too is that computer science programs are different. Every computer science program is different. So in my experience, I came from physics to the CS program at the same school. And, you know, some of the classes there started from page 1 of the textbook. It was just like, for example, algorithms. It might be the more advanced version of the undergrad algorithms class. Now, I hadn't had an undergraduate algorithms class, so it was a faster pace than I was like expecting maybe, but it was still starting from step 1. Other classes were like assumed that you had a full computer science undergraduate background. Like I took a class that was like all about like the workings of the Intel Itanium processor. And I'm like, I don't know how any processor works. And you're like focusing on this very complicated thing. And it was kind of it was a fun challenge because like I had to kind of like pick up on stuff. Like they would say words in class that I had no idea what they were talking about, but you know, you kind of had to take, like Shannon said, like the onus was on me. I understood that I would have to do some catching up, and it wasn't insurmountable. So yeah, that's one thing I want to point out. You know, depending on what program you go to, like they might expect you to have differing levels of computer science background. But I think in a lot of cases, a master's degree is meant to be a way to switch focus, and so they're designed with that in mind, that, you know, you may not have a computer science background. That's okay.
I think that's really helpful to hear. You know, again, it goes into really looking at the programs that you're applying to and what the expectations they have for their students, but also to managing your own expectations of, I really want to do this, so I may have to work a little harder, you know, to get caught up, but it's worth it because this is what I'm really interested in doing. You also mentioned to me that you are a first-generation student, and we just had a big symposium on first-generation students this morning. So in honor of that, I would love for you to just share your perspective, and maybe for some of the other, you know, first-gen students listening in, whether you found certain things helpful or certain challenges that were unexpected, or just general advice, since they maybe aren't really sure who to go to for advice as they navigate this.
Yeah, and I'm happy to give advice to people if they're, you know, if they want one-on-one advice. You know, I've been thinking a little bit about maybe what first gen students are kind of more susceptible to, like the kind of like fears or thoughts that they might have. And I don't know, I think like one thing is sort of just a lack of confidence. I remember applying for undergrad programs, and I was like interested in these top schools. Like I went to MIT, you know, toured the Northeast, and I was like, wow, all of these are great. But when it came time to apply to schools, I only applied to one, and I applied to Ohio State because I knew I would get in, and I thought I would get eaten alive at another school. And I think I really should have applied to more schools. I'm glad I went to Ohio State, but like I had that lack of confidence there, and it repeated itself whenever I applied to grad school. I only applied to one graduate school, and it was Ohio State because I knew I would get in, and I was already there, and I had an advisor picked out. And that lack of confidence, I think you know, it's just I don't know if that's because I was a first gen student. I never really made that connection. I'm still not sure that was a connection, but you know, just keep that in mind. Like for anybody, if you're feeling not so confident, just go ahead and apply to some of these other schools. I mean, you might not get in, but that's okay. They made a mistake, right? The second thing I would say is like, you know, I think for first gen students, one of the sort of tropes I hear, one of the things is like, you know, like people don't know where to get their textbooks on the first day of class, or they don't know generally like how the college thing works or how the graduate school thing works. And I think that's true, right? Like, so there's like this institutional knowledge that nobody like knows when they come to college, and then you have to learn it. What I think happens is in a lot of cases, like, so professors will get 100 emails that are all just like, you know, when is discussion? What is discussion? Is it discussion mandatory? And like all of these questions are like, for somebody who's been in academia for, you know, a decade or plus, they're like easy questions. And eventually they get kind of frustrated answering these questions, and they'll snap back and be like, yes, you should have read the syllabus or something like this. And what it does is it trains students to feel like asking simple questions is a pain, and they don't want to ask simple questions. Now, a lot of the time, yes, that you should be reading the syllabus, but I think I can think back into graduate school where like you'd be in a setting, in a meeting where somebody would use a term, and you're like, I should know this term, but I'm too afraid to ask what it is. And people use like terminology informally all the time, incorrectly. And like for me, I really like it when they use things correctly. When they use it informally, I think I don't understand what it is, when it's just, they're just kind of throwing things like anybody who's taken a, you know, big O and big theta notation. Like everybody uses big O notation. It's not formally like maybe the right notation to use. They should be using big theta. And I'm like, why are you using big O? You're using big theta. And so like, basically what I'm saying there is like, you know, never be too afraid to ask a simple question, right? We're all here to learn. And so just being aware of maybe those two tendencies, I think would kind of help first generation students, help all students, I think.
And I think that advice can be, you know, thrown across the board. I know I had an alumni share with me that she had never taken a coding class until she entered our major, and she was afraid to ask, like, well, what is that? And what do you mean by that? Because she didn't want to, you know, look or feel less competent than her peers. Whereas, you know, I think too, our students, you know, they are used to succeeding. They're used to knowing the answer. And when you have to ask a question, you know, it's uncomfortable terrain, and you forget that no one's expecting you to be perfect. That's why you're there, is to learn and develop and grow. And you're not going to do that if you don't, you know, get the information you need to succeed. So I think that is that's perfect, and I think that's a really wonderful way for us to transition into opening it up for questions. So so if you have any questions, please put them into the chat. You can either direct them to me personally, again, Margaret Zolke. I'm oh, it's not by last name. I was going to say I'm probably the last one on the list, but it goes by first name. Or you can post it out for everyone. I'll be moderating those while we wait for those. You know, I think we've heard a lot of information. We've heard a lot of different perspectives. And I think the takeaways that I'm hearing are, you know, really think about what's your goal of going to grad school, what's the program look like, and what is that going to give you, and how is that going to impact what your next steps and opportunities are, and trying your best to think about that holistically and not being afraid to ask questions while you're going through that experience so you can make the most of that experience. I'm not seeing any questions come through. Oh, okay, perfect. So a question for Professor Eldridge. How do you prepare to get into a PhD program in CS?
So if you're like me, you do it totally incorrectly. And so one thing I kind of wanted to mention about PhD versus master's and all this stuff is like I decided to do a PhD before I decided to do a PhD in computer science, which is totally the wrong way of doing things. I was like, I want to stay in school. I want to do more of this. I'm good at it, I guess. So I'm going to keep doing it. And I didn't understand anything about what a PhD is whenever I started it. I was like, yeah, I'd like to be a professor. I'd like to teach, right? But, you know, professors, a PhD is a research apprenticeship. You are job shadowing someone for 7 years to learn how they think and how they publish research and how they manage a lab. It's like running a small business, basically. Mm-hmm. So it's much more of a research apprenticeship. And so like, going into the PhD, that's the first way that you prepare is you figure out, is that what I want to do? Or do I want to teach? Or do I want to, now I got lucky. I found a teaching position after my PhD at a great place. So, I mean, it does happen. But I guess, so second, I mean, so I was always doing computational things. I always had an interest in computer science. So even in sort of the research, undergraduate research projects I was doing in physics, I was writing code. I was interested in like neural nets and stuff like that, to where I was developing a little bit of vocabulary and some projects that I could point to. I think that can be very helpful if you're applying to a different field, is just maybe to show that you have some experience, you know what the field is about, so that you're not just applying to it because you've heard it has high salaries or something like that. That, you know, you have some, you basically what you want to show the committee, the admissions committee for a PhD or for a master's degree, is you have a high likelihood of success if you go to that program. And so I don't see it being totally different for a PhD or master's. I think, well, the big difference, of course, is that, you know, if you have some undergraduate research, that can definitely help the PhD admissions committee feel like you're likely to be a success there. But yeah, I wasn't very intentional about my preparation for the CS PhD program, so I might not be the best person to ask. But, oh, one last thing. Mm-hmm. I think one of the lessons from that is that, you know, you don't have to have everything optimized right now. I'm an example of someone who probably did most things wrong and it ended up okay. And I probably got very lucky. But even, you know, as long as you're doing some planning and you're thinking ahead, you don't have to have the next 7 to 10 years planned out perfectly. Things work out. Okay. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. You know, it's that you can think you're doing something wrong and it still ends up working out right. Kind of to Paul's point, there really is no right or wrong. It's just really, you know, moving forward in what you think is most right for you. We do have a couple questions and we're running close on time. So Paul, maybe you could help answer this one for us. So just with your industry perspective, I know one obstacle we've come across with our undergrad program in data science is people don't really know what that is. Whereas the master's in data science has been around for a little bit longer, but is still newer compared to like a master's in CS. And so when it comes down to it, do people really care what the title is of your degree, or what are they really focused on when they're considering you, and how does that maybe impact people's decision-making process of which program to pursue?
I think it only matters in as much as there's some roles that are going to have a a specific hurdle you have to get over. Like if you're getting some kind of computer engineering role, you may need a computer engineering or computer science degree. And so if you have a data science degree, it doesn't mean that necessarily that role is not available. It just means you might have to do a little bit more selling of yourself to explain why it's applicable to that kind of role. And for things like that, it's always helpful to have projects, right, where if you've either published something or worked to deliver something or worked with some other group, so that you can show how what you've learned has applied in a practical way, so it helps someone interpret what it is you do. And I think that gets into, when you're looking at the graduate degrees, also, figuring out what you want to learn and understanding, when you're doing research on which schools to apply to, who hires out of those schools can be helpful. I mean, if you're looking to stay local, the area is helpful. If you're looking to, say, for an MBA, you're looking to get to one of the big three, like you want to work for a Deloitte, you've already pared down how many schools you're going to apply to, because you're trying to get to a certain position at a certain type of company that only hires from a couple others. So there's some relationships like that, and the easiest way to figure that out is to reach out through alumni connections and things like that. And LinkedIn can be really helpful on finding someone who may have gone to the same undergraduate school you've gone to and is in that master's program. And there's no tax on just sending someone like that a question and seeing if they can help you understand if that's a good fit for you.
That's great. That's really aligned with a lot of the research tactics I recommended last week of use LinkedIn, talk to current students, talk to alumni, see, what jobs they're in now and what schools are interested in recruiting from that program. So yeah, I think it's, when you're making your decision, it's really about the career path you want. It's about that next step, and it's really about what's going to set you up for that successfully. So we've got one last question, and I'm going to tie it into one of my last questions for all of the panelists here. So someone had asked, when you think about grad school, is it really about the education you're getting, or is it just having that higher level of degree? And I'd also like to hear your perspective on, for students thinking about grad school right now, how is that decision maybe a little different right now during COVID than it would be any other time? So whoever wants to start first, I know it's kind of a double loaded question, but yeah, the purpose of it, do you really see it as the education, or just having, that degree on your resume to open up opportunities? And in thinking about grad school as well, how is that different right now for our students than any other time? Sean, go ahead.
I do have a pretty clear statement. So for grad school, honestly, you're not gonna learn as much technical stuff in the grad school, because it's short, and they gotta accommodate people from different backgrounds. So they are definitely not gonna be as good as you in terms of data science. However, outside people like high managers, they value grad school way too much. It's overrated by them, because they always think, oh, grad school students are better than undergrad students. That is totally wrong in reality, but the HR evaluates too much. So grad school, yes, it's really a piece of degree that people think you are good at it. In the undergrad, maybe you are good at it, and people just don't know it. But when you go to grad school, people will think you are good at it. Yes. That also applies to technical master and non-technical master. For non-technical master, it's more like you are proving others that you are good at it. But in the technical masters, you are really learning that you will be good at it. You just need to let people know it. Yeah. So just in sum up, you're not gonna learn as much in grad school. It's not gonna be as intense as undergrad, unless you go into a very prestigious school like CMU, and you are majoring in a very specific CS program, like for example, like software development. It's probably more rigorous, but for the most other programs, not as much.
Gotcha. And any specific advice for, students that are about to graduate that are thinking about grad school right now?
Really be confident, because if you can see this chat, if you can hear me, you are really, really good. You are smart, and you should be really, really proud of being in the data science department. I can tell from my undergrad experience, the UCSD data science really prepares us very, very well in terms of the technical and in terms of the team part, the 180 capstone project. It is great. I do have a capstone project in my UC Berkeley's, but it's not as organized, not as planned as well as UCSD's capstone project. Yes, so
Great.
be really, really confident. You should be really, really proud of yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's move on to Chris quickly for his final thoughts and words, because I know he's got to run off to class soon.
Yeah, sure. So I'll touch on the degree thing versus like it being a piece of paper. I do agree that, like, to an extent, right, if you're looking at getting a promotion or whatever, if that degree is on the table, it's easier to justify on paper why you should be a good fit, especially for managerial stuff like business school. It helps because those are soft skills. They're harder to prove than hard skills, where it's like, okay, I've done this technical project, but it's like, how are you a good communicator? It's harder to do that. So I think for business related stuff, I think the higher education definitely helps, which is why MBA exists. And then for people, like, advice for people that are applying to graduate school right now, I think definitely don't worry as much about making a mistake. I think when Professor Eldridge was talking, I resonated with a lot of stuff. Like, I think I did a lot of things wrong in my application process, and like, you're going to, this is the first, you only do it once pretty much, where you're like trying to apply to graduate school. So there's so many different factors that you're going to make some mistakes. But I think definitely knowing what you want to do, like knowing what you're interested in is like the biggest thing, is because if you're interested in it and you truly want to do it, like, you'll make it happen. So that's my advice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know you might have to run, so thank you so much for being here and for sharing your guidance and your experience. I know we have a ton of students interested in business analytics, so I think it's great that you were able to share your experience so far. And best of luck in the rest of your program with your finals coming up.
Thank you. Also, for anybody in this Zoom call, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or anything. And some people have already from UCSD reached out to me with questions about what my experience was like. So I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So yeah, I'm going to go to class. Thank you for having me, Margaret. And
thanks so much. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Let's see here. So maybe Paul, maybe we can move on to you. So your opinion of, the education versus accreditation, and any last, pieces of advice for our students right now.
I think one thing that as Sean kind of touched on is part of a degree is signaling, and that signaling might not be rational, right? You may get more credit for getting a degree where you didn't learn as much compared to another degree. What in 5 to 10 years, if you're in industry, is going to be almost completely overcoming that as a strong signal that you have a certain degree, is what projects have you done? So even as you're working through your undergraduate and your graduate, start keeping like a kitchen sink CV where you throw in all the projects that you, all the different techniques that you've applied, because there's going to come some time, if you're applying to an industry position, where they're going to want to know, can you do a certain type of thing with a certain type of technique or a certain type of tool? And being able to pull out a specific example might be the difference in getting an interview or not. And then once you get in the interview, you get the opportunity to kind of show what you know beyond what you've been able to signal. And that's a real helpful way to get over that first hump of getting in the room. Because once you get in the room, if you're in a program like this, like you said, you're going to be a strong candidate, and you're going to have that opportunity to put that strong foot forward.
Great. Thank you so much. Professor Ellis, what do you have to share, or what are your thoughts on this?
Very quickly, I'll speak to the PhD versus not PhD, since we've heard a bit about the master's, and it can be both, but either depth of knowledge or the fact that you need this to get to your next step. But if you're going to a PhD, make sure you actually need that for the next step. It is a lot of time, and you don't want to spend 5 to 7 years doing something if you didn't actually need to. And make sure you're not going just as a default, because it's a lot of time. Masters, it's okay to default. It's not necessarily that much time if you have the funds to do it, right? Masters cost money. So there's always these things to balance, and you may not be able to do it for financial reasons, and that's okay. There's a path outside of it to get to your goals, at least in the short term. You may eventually need to go back, and that's okay too. For COVID reasons, yeah, think about what you want. Think about what steps you need to take to get there, and know that it's okay to pursue a few paths at the same time and figure out which one's best for you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Professor Eldridge.
And I do have to run, so thank you
Yes,
so much.
okay, well, thank you
Sorry,
so much
Justin.
for helping us and for attending. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, so like as an educator, I kind of like, I view, my job as to educate, and I see like the degree as being I focus more on it being like you're learning during the degree and then you get a piece of paper. But I understand that basically universities and master's degrees and graduate programs are in some sense like a vetting process for industry, just to see, like it's an extended interview almost, just to make sure that you have some base level of knowledge. I'll say that like, maybe 5 years ago, maybe like a lot of data scientists would have had to get a PhD or and it's not necessarily, I think why employers were looking for PhDs was mostly because if you look at where they were drawing the people from, it wasn't from computer science departments only, or only from math departments. It was from chemistry, biology, any field that had some quantitative aspect to it. And what they were looking for were people who could think critically about data. And that's what I want to emphasize. Like get whatever degree is going to position you to get in the door and start your career, but you should be honing your critical thinking about data skills, because that's what's going to accelerate your career and give you as much success as possible.
Great, thank you so much. Let's give a virtual round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you so much. I know that, it's when it comes to grad school, especially coming from a newer undergrad degree, it's for anybody, it's a big decision, but then for our students, there's an extra layer on it of, well, what about data science and what about these career paths as this field is blossoming and creating new opportunities on what feels like almost a daily basis. So thank you for all attending. Again, this has been recorded, and so it will be shared in an upcoming data science weekly newsletter. You can also feel free to directly message the data science department through your virtual advising center, and I can share with you the link individually as soon as I have it available. Eventually, the HDSI website will be updated with an HDSI career services page where all of these links will be shared. And I had seen a couple questions coming through the chat about, more about, do I go to grad school or not? And that was something that we really addressed and had some crossover with some of the things that came up today in last week's workshop. That recording will definitely be in this upcoming Monday's weekly newsletter in case you weren't able to attend. And then don't forget to join us next Friday for our final session, where we'll have some grad programs sharing information and connecting with students in case their program is the right fit for you. So thank you again to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your advice and experience with our students. Thank you, students, for taking advantage of their advice and knowledge. And we hope to see everybody next week. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.